I'm gonna just share a few thoughts on a little simple tool that I believe some people might be overlooking in the value that it can provide you when it comes to your gardening and practices all year round. And you can still obtain one of these little handy tools for around $12 to $15. This thing is one of the most versatile tools that I have. It is not a replacement by any means for a hand trowel, hoe, rake, or shovel. I mean, those are just must-haves when you're doing any type of gardening. I'll show you these 3 ways in which you can utilize this tool, and I'm going to give you a couple tips that might be helpful and beneficial for you. Let me grab it, get set up, and try to make this as quick as possible. All right, before you discount it, you might want to take a look at this. This is what I'm talking about. One of these little garden augers. This particular one happens to be a 2.5 inch diameter, and it's about 24 inches long. This little guy, or something similar to it, is a lot more versatile and handy and convenient and efficient for you than you might think. I think you might end up finding it to be quite enjoyable. And before I do, because I'm a wood chip gardener, I would do this if I was doing any planting. I normally don't use my rake, but I'm going to pull back my thin layer of wood chips that I'm going to have to replace. It just makes things very systematic so I don't have to go back and forth from tool to tool to tool. Now, I only have 2 sizes of augers. I've got this old one here. Maybe I can focus in on that. It's just a little 1 inch, maybe 1.25 inch auger. I don't know how old this thing is. I utilize it, and I utilize this 2.5 inch diameter auger that is about 24 inches long. I'm going to use this little clay painted pot here, but it would represent about the size, maybe a little wider on top here, but approximate size of the 2-inch soil block, and that's primarily my source of seed starting in the late winter, early spring if I'm going to do any seed starts. But I also utilize 4-inch pots, and then anything in between I can also accommodate when I'm doing my seed starting in my miniature greenhouses that I showed with utilizing those containers on the channel. Assuming it's my 2-inch soil block right now, what I want to do, I want to go to the depth of about twice the depth of this 2-inch soil block, or in this case, this little pot. That's how deep I want to drill, and that is twofold. I want this out of my way now, so that now I can bring my cart in, I can bring a basket or my trays or whatever of all my seed starts, and I can just come down through here and mess with that only with my hands. Then all I have to do is I have to just flick my fingers and I can push in that loose soil that the auger brought up, and I can just gently tap it in lightly at the bottom like so. And I don't have to have any other hand tools. I can set my 2-inch soil block or my seed start in there, and then I just gently backfill and then tap around with my fingers, grab the next one, and just move on down the line. I don't have to worry about if I got deep enough and now I don't have the great soil conditions and I have to dig around with my finger, or I have to get a hand trowel and start digging. I don't want to mess with tools. I just want to make this systematic so that it becomes quick, easy, and efficient, and I can get out of the hot sun or get back to drinking my coffee or get to the lake. By going deeper and backfilling with the loose soil and lightly tamping, when you put that soil block or your transplant into that hole, underneath of that transplant, there's a more airy and loose soil media underneath it. And plant root systems will do kind of like water. they will take the path of least resistance in order to seek out what they want. And for me in this garden, I want them to go down deeper and not have that root system close to the surface, because the closer to the surface, the sooner the moisture is going to evaporate and dry out. And I'd rather encourage those root systems to go down deeper. So that's another good reason to dig your hole deeper than the transplant you're putting in the ground. Now, this size pot, I want to do the same thing, but I got a 4-inch pot and it's not going to go into a 2.5-inch hole. But I want to apply the same principles that I would with my small 2-inch soil blocks. All right, I'm having a hard time there. There we go. I found a spot. Probably hitting the edge of that rock out. What you're going to do, I'm going to pull my auger up a little bit, and then I'm going to waller that hole out just like this, okay? And I'm going to do this for every hole moving down the line. And any of the media that falls in the hole, it's going to go down and it's going to fill the rest of that 2.5-inch hole that's deeper down in there. And I don't have to have a hand trowel. And then I just take my plant out and I would just set it in here, and then I can backfill, lightly tamp, and I'm done. Grab the next one and do the same thing all the way down the line. You need to drill all your holes first, waller them out, go deeper than needed for your transplant for those two reasons. So you ain't picking up the tool, and so you're creating that little loamy space underneath your transplant to encourage the roots to take the path of least resistance to get deeper down into your garden soil for nutrients and for the moisture level, especially when we're having these 100+ degree temperatures and it's just evaporating the first 2 or 3, 4 inches of your soil. Try not to apply much lateral pressure on your drill here when you're trying to waller that hole out. Let the bit break up that soil as you're going down and creating your holes. Because if you don't, you're going to be finding yourself probably having to replace your drill a lot sooner than you thought, because that lateral pressure was not intended on a drill. They're intended to put pressure this way, not this lateral pressure, and you're going to wear your shaft and bearings out in your $200, $300 drills. So just keep that in mind when you're wallering them holes out like this, and just let the drill bit work the soil up, and it will do it. So use the drill, get it out of the way, or the rake in my case, get it out of the way. The drill, get it out of the way. Bring your plants in, and now you're just dealing with the plants and your hands, and then that's completed and done. Grab your watering can or your watering hose, do your first little water in, and then you're done. So now let's get into the second good reason to have one of these augers, and my primary purpose outside of the planting that I utilize one of these things, this particular one and this 1 inch or 1.25 inch all year long. Now, using this all year round, that would be suggestive that I'm planting all season long or all year round, and I am not. Throughout the course of the year, especially on my wood chip gardening, because I'm not used to watering on my garden, because when I have 2 or 3, 4 inches of wood chips as my covering mulch on my garden, I don't have to water. But this year's been different. My wood chip layer is much, much thinner. It's broke down way quicker than I wanted it to, and this little tool right here has helped determine for me when I need to start watering my garden. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do this a little bit different than I would when I go to planting. I don't want to utilize this auger in full as it was designed to do, and that means drill a hole and auger will lift that media up out of the hole trying to clean it out, and then when it gets above the hole it slings it out, right? Creates that little berm around your hole. I don't want to do that so much. I want to go down, and I'm going to go down kind of slow, and I want to push downward on my drill and get as far down as I possibly can, and then I want to grab my auger so it doesn't come out of the chuck, and I want to pull the dirt up. All right. So basically when I do this, what I have got is I have got a rudimentary soil sample. See if I can get a better sample. But you get the idea, okay? You get the idea. That's about as deep as I'm getting right now. And right now we got that 5.5 inches of rain about 2 days ago, and that's why I come out here with this thing and thought, well, let me just share some thoughts on this little tool because I utilize it so much. But see how I can just feel it, I can look at it, I can see it, I can smell it, all these things. It is not a highly scientific method, but this is how the old timers did. That's what they would do. They would feel, smell, and some of them, they would even put the soil in their mouth to taste it. I don't make a habit of doing that, but it's a good rudimentary soil sample that you have physically through your sense of sight and your smell and your physical nervous system in the feel of touch when it comes to tasting your soil. And that's what lets me know how much of that water in doing the watering or the rain penetrated down and how deep it went. I can do 6, 7, 10, 12 holes in a matter of 5 minutes, and I get a good idea of what the moisture content is in my soil without having to use a pick or a shovel or a post hole digger or anything like this. Makes it very handy. This is especially true in a raised bed. All right, now this is probably what you're more than likely to see in some sort of advertisement when it comes to these garden augers being employed. And this would be applicable if you have a raised bed. It's a lot easier. I come down in here and you see I have no berm. I'm thinking I can magnify into here, and I'm just going to pull it up real quickly. I can feel temperature of what's going on down there. I can see the composition, see how it's breaking apart right there. I got more moisture up at the top. Some of it's settled straight down to the bottom, but there's some places in there where I still have some dry media. So I'm going to do this again. Pull it up, and I can check 2 or 3 times here in all kinds of different situations. Pull it off, smell it, feel it, look at the decomposition that's taken place within the soil, and most importantly for me is knowing how much moisture and at what extent, because now I can just grab it and see if I got any moisture coming through my fingers, and I do not. Very quick, very fast, efficient, and very reliable. So now you see what we've just done. This goes all the way to the bottom in this 4 foot by 4.5 foot IBC tote bed. Now I wanted to show you this because this brings up the third reason or purpose for having such a tool like this that's going to maybe cost you in currency $12 to $15. What we just did, we just created a big deep hole from top to bottom in this compost bin. We have just created something that they talk about in this bioreactor when it comes to composting. Folks, when I look around in these woods, what I comprehend is I am living in a biological reactor. Everything out here in nature is reacting biologically and breaking things down and composting and the whole yada yada yada. So long as I have the right moisture content within this bin, the longer that the integrity of those walls of that 2.5 inch hole going all the way to the bottom are going to sustain itself. There's no air pump here. There's no PVC. There's no special anything. If you're worried about this aeration business, there you go. You just created a big, massive pinhole like I talked about in the video previously for your compost pile. Right dead center. If that's not enough for you, Now I got 5 holes here, and I've done it in about, what, 10-15 seconds. And if this thing was covered and this was a fresh compost pile, this thing would be just absolutely beautiful. I know for a fact, because that is how all of these were created, and it gives me a great composition in my composting. So grab your auger, grab your drill. Within a matter of seconds, walk out to your compost pile, whether it's a wood chip pile, a human manure pile, it doesn't matter. No turning, no nothing. So an aerator. That is the third good reason for those folks that don't believe in the power and the ability of atmospheric pressure to penetrate your composting piles. Now, here's the downfall by creating these holes and leaving them. Because now you've got the walls of these 2.5-inch holes all down through here for that moisture to be able to escape out of the internal parts of your compost pile and evaporate. So your pile is going to dry out a lot quicker. My suggestion, if you do it, is throw in some of the loose media back in there. Slow down that process. And so there, maybe you get a happy medium if you're worried about aeration within your compost pile. Since we're here, I'm going to put in this 1-inch drill because I haven't explained where I would utilize this. Typically in a raised bed, you're going to be pretty inundated with your plants. Without digging and disturbing the root systems of the plants, I can get in between the plants and a little bit separation and have a less chance of cutting those roots and still be able to achieve what I want to achieve, and that is gain the knowledge primarily on the moisture content of my media within my raised bed. So that's where I utilize this little 1-inch auger. This should give you some ideas on how you might be able to employ such a cheap economic tool to increase your efficiency and speed production when it comes to transplanting and aerating your compost piles and checking the moisture content deeper within the soil without having to go buy some high dollar special equipment to check that moisture level down low, or these cheapy moisture testers that you get in the box store. I don't find them to be reliable whatsoever. But these are the 3 primary reasons that I find such a tool to be beneficial. And if you find it to be beneficial and edify, all I ask you to do is pass along, share with somebody else. Meanwhile, have a nice day. May all your branches become full of fruit, and I will see you next time. Hoorah!